this evening having a good idea of what the program is. Do you have an idea that would fit it? And if you think you do, what you need to do to actually apply. And then if you get past the initial application, what the process is. So, my goal is really to help you. So feel free to, think of questions you have and, quiz me, because that's why I came here, okay? So a little bit about me, and then we'll sort of jump into the program. I'm somebody who started out in online news, ended up going to the business side at sites like Netscape.com, an executive at AOL and Yahoo, and now I'm running a small startup and doing this part-time. So this has been great for me because I get to really help the Knight Foundation with a program that I'm very excited about, but I also get to have my own little startup, which is still unfunded. So it works out really well. But last year I was a reviewer for the program and started to interact with people at Knight. And what's really interesting is that this is a foundation that's really taken off in a different direction. You probably know that the Knight Foundation is based on money that was left in endowment by two brothers who basically started a very successful media company 80 to 100 years ago. So we hear about the Knight chaired university in journalism, or you hear about Knight Ritter newspapers. That's very much Knight family who endowed this foundation. So they made their money in what at the time were the prevalent forms of media. And up until 2 years ago, a lot of the Knight money really did go toward funding chairs and journalism programs. And then what happened was that Alberto Elbargen came in. He'd been the publisher of the Miami Herald, and he became the head of the foundation. And he's just a brilliant, visionary kind of guy. And he was like, how can we create programs that really are going to speak to improving discourse, improving democracy in our country, and really making a difference. And so this particular program, which is in its third year, is very much about the idea of if 100 years ago, newspapers were kind of a town center, a place where people spoke truth to power, where citizens could get really accurate information and really talk about it. Where is that speaking truth to power and that empowerment happening today? If people are moving away from newspapers and onto the web, and we all know the struggles newspapers are having to survive anyway, what are the new centers and what are the new ways to support the kind of discourse and engagement and speaking truth to power, in the formats we use today, like digital media and internet technology. So over the 3 years, the program has moved more and more from being something about let's just fund online news to we want to support online news, we want to support online journalism, we also really want to support innovation. And we want to think both of new tools and platforms, and also new ways to really help communities. So it's a very exciting program to be affiliated with because it's a program that really is trying to push the envelope. And as someone who does have a startup and spent the summer at a tech incubator hearing all about what VCs want and investment and rate of return, I'll say the other thing that's exciting about this program is while ideally Knight is going to fund things that will be successful and will be sustainable, it's not a venture-driven portfolio. In other words, the goal here is to really innovate and create things of value. It's not to calculate what their multiple would be, how much money they're going to make in 3 years, what the exit is. Obviously, things that do have a business model and can be sustainable, have a foot in reality that's fantastic. So it's not that Knight doesn't care about that, but your project's not going to be judged on how quickly it's going to return an X multiple of revenue to investors. So I find that really exciting because there aren't that many ways to get money for ideas that are out there right now that are quite as open as Knight is. So let me talk a little bit about what Knight's looking for and what some of the rules are. And the site that we're looking at right now is newschallenge.org. And this is a great place to really get information. There's an FAQ that's really well worth reading. You can look at the past winners. You can read the About section. But here's the thing that I really kind of want to emphasize. There really are 4 basics in terms of what you want to think about if you have an idea. One, Knight is looking for innovation. If you have a fantastic idea to fund citizen journalism in your community that's never had any, ask yourself, what is innovative about this besides the fact I'm doing it in my community? If the answer is nothing, well, you may not have that competitive shot at this particular funding program. It doesn't mean it's not a great idea. So, really it's how can I not only serve the citizenry and serve a geographic location, but do it in a way that's actually going to push the envelope in some way. It's going to take some risks. And I got very excited when I heard Alberto say about a month ago, if half the things we fund in this program don't fail, we're playing too safe. So if you have ideas that have some risk associated, I would say don't shy away from it. Don't try to second guess. Well, what do they really want? I think there is a hunger here to come up with some things that are a little edgier and not well-trodden paths, as well as things that just kind of serve the greater good. So innovation is a very important criteria for judging ideas that are submitted. Another one is having a geographic focus. I spend a lot of time talking to people about, that's a great idea, I understand it will change the whole world, but where are you going to start? Knight's founded a couple of projects, like one called Place Blogger, that's a directory of local blogs and sites all over the world, and Every Block, which is a output of RSS feeds of local data, like building permits and things that are very technical that we don't usually see. But in general, what they're trying to fund in this program are things attached to real communities. So if you have something that's a software product that will be great for the whole universe, that's great. It would make your application stronger if you had a test bed of one or two places that were actually real. So if you wanted to start something in Seattle or in the Pacific Northwest, having a town or a region that's kind of your starting point really is what this particular program is looking for. So with Every Block, which Knight gave $1 million to in 2007, they started by saying, we want to take all this data that the city government has in Chicago, and we're going to expose that first, and then we're going to go on to other cities. So now they're in year 2, and they have like 8 cities. But they didn't say we have something we can do everywhere. They had a particular instance they attached, and that made them really compelling for this program. So having a geographic focus is another important criteria, even if you can go way beyond it with what you're proposing. Okay. Third thing is it has to have some kind of news or engagement hook. Someone submitted a proposal to the Garage, which is an open peer mentoring site that I'll show you, and it was for a nurses union. And I was like, this is fantastic, but I don't think giving nurses a way to talk to each other fits the Knight new rules. So, Knight is generally looking for a more geo-specific population. It could be kids and teenagers, it could be adults, but if it's one specific, cohort that's as specialized as nurses, is that discourse among nurses going to really help improve and change society on a broader base? For that community, clearly the person had a great idea, but for this particular program, I think we're looking for something to be a little bit broader. How do you define a little bit broader? Well, that can be tricky, right? So we'll sort of talk about that too. And then the last thing is that it be open source. Now, what does open source mean? On one hand, open source means, yes, if you're writing code that you can share and expose, that's great. But it also could mean that basically the knowledge and the work that's done can be shared and used by other people. So even if it's a for-profit commercial thing that you want Knight to fund, which they're fine with funding, there has to be some way that you have an API that can be exposed, you have learning and knowledge that you can share with people so people can take what you've done and do it in other places. They can incorporate it with something else and kind of mash it up. There has to be some transfer. If you want to build proprietary software where you're just going to do it, you don't want to share it with anybody, because it's yours, this is not the right program to look for funding with. So again, open source, like innovative, is something where you can kind of argue, the definitions and a little bit subjective, but, we've had people who said, well, I just want money to do my business, and, this probably isn't the place to get that. They really do want things to have some transfer value. So you could substitute transfer value for open source. That would probably be a helpful way to think about it from a non-tech perspective. So those are really the 4 things that you want in an application.